So Rob, thanks for catching up with us. It's almost 5 years to the day since we first met when you took over. You bought the assets from Macclesfield Town and you reformed Macclesfield FC. What an incredible journey it's been.
Do you know what, Bob? It has been the most amazing journey. It's been incredible. I've loved absolutely every minute. You know, it's been emotional. When I say it has been the best journey I've ever been on, it really has, and I've loved absolutely every single minute of it.
It's been an emotional roller coaster more than anything. Some amazing highs, a few lows, some very sad things when you look back at people like Anna. But in terms of how you reflect on it, how do you reflect on these first 5 years?
It's been like I said, it's been a journey. It's been a massive journey I've been on. You know, obviously when the first I heard of the club going bankrupt to then buying it, and then realising, what an absolute monster I'd bought. And it was a case of, how can I turn this into something amazing? And I always wanted to create something and a legacy for myself, and I thought there's no better place to try and build a football club and make it absolutely amazing. And I think, what I've done over the last 5 years, has been fantastic. I mean, when I look at, we've got an unbelievable fan base that has returned back and supported me on every single thing that I've done. The staff that I've employed in the different departments have been amazing. And then there's all the business things, the gym, where we started that. We're now at just, short of 900 members. That's been incredible. We've had, 38 teams. We've got over 600 kids now playing football in the academy, which, has increased massively over the last years. Obviously the BTEC program, we've got our own school here now, which is incredible. And when you look at all the different areas of the businesses, that I've created, I think, that income that generates, has helped that first team push the promotions each year. And, and now sort of looking at where we are now, it's we're 5 years on, and I've spent every single day here pretty much. I'm here at every single game. I feel it. I'm excited by it. And it has been one hell of a journey, and every part of it, I've absolutely loved.
Being honest, you didn't realise what you were buying, did you? Because I remember some of our first conversations when you were talking about crowds of 200-300, things like that. And I remember saying to you, Rob, this was Macclesfield Town, mate. And I don't think at that time you realised how big this project could have been, did you?
No, I didn't. No, I think that was the funny thing. I remember, like, when I got the bunch of keys, and I opened the place up, and I was just like, what have I bought? And then I started to spend a lot of money of my own hard-earned money, replacing the pitch and building the bars and the restaurants and trying to build this business model from nothing, to make sure that the club was self-sustainable. And I think that was a massive challenge. And me and Robbie at the time, we worked here every single day to achieve those goals. And, I can't thank him enough for what he did, because, we did it together. And, when I look back, I'd have never have changed anything, because, it has been incredible.
Looking back, difficult question. What do you think you're most proud of?
Do you know what? Good question. I think it's building a community back. I think it's the fans that I'm most proud of. I'm really proud of the people that we see through the gates. I've built some amazing friends. You see people coming here on a Saturday, they're excited, their enthusiasm, that the whole thing is amazing to see, and it is their life. And I think I've given an opportunity for all the fans to get behind something again and really be a part of something that's going to be amazing.
So in terms of the statement we put out last week, again, about a future restructure, in practice, what does that actually mean? I know you want to update fans on that as well.
Yeah, look, this is really difficult. I'm not going to lie. I think, like I said, I've spent 5 years now building the football club, and I put my heart and soul in it, and hopefully everybody, they can see the amount of work and effort that I put into it. I wanted to make sure that the club was sustainable, as we moved up through the leagues. And what I wanted to do was to get investment in as well. So we brought in Amar, Dan, we brought Brig in, and Darren and John Bull, and I sort of diluted my shares down to a figure that I felt comfortable with. But again, making sure that we have the right people that can run that football club moving forward. And I think, the type of people and the determination of the board is something that, I had to sort of handpick and make sure they were the right people for the football club. And, that's certainly something that I've done. But it's come a time where, I'm here every single day. I'm not spending much time with the family on the weekends. I've got 3 boys that are playing football for Macclesfield, and sometimes they're away on a Saturday. So I'm trying to be back here. I'm trying to run the operations as far as, making sure that, the standards remain really, really high. And, and I've just felt over the last sort of, 3-4 months, probably since Robbie's gone as well, that the reality of trying to take on the first team and really sort of indulge myself into that area, which as the Mac fans do, is an area that I've never really ever looked at. Clearly I understood bits of it, but I've always concentrated on the business side. And, I feel that the best way to move this football club forward now is to bring someone in with more experience than me that can handle a lot of what this club is all about, and that is the first team. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm an expert, because, the reality of it is, over the last couple of months, the amount of strain and energy that I've had to put in there and learn, and deal with agents and contracts and players and emotions, and and I just felt that I'm probably not that person to do that. So for me, I've had a huge reflection on then thinking about, well, also, the day-to-day operations of the club as well is something that, I feel that if we can bring in the right person, then, that is capable of doing that, then one, it'll give me more time to spend more time with the family, which to me is number one, and that's what is the most important thing. I've got other business interests as well that I need to go away and concentrate on now. People that know me, I love building businesses, and, I thrive off that, and I need that in my life, and that's something that I want to go off and do. But mainly I want to, spend a lot more time with my kids, and, and it's really important to me that I watch them grow up. And, a club like this needs everything. It needs, 100% commitment. And we had a big board meeting today. It was a great meeting, and the lads on the board who own the club now, have really sort of said that they'll step forward now and really start to make this club move on to the next level. And that was really nice to hear as well. And I think that's really important as a Mac fan, that we are in really capable hands of the new board. I think it's really important to have a board. It used to just be me making the decisions, right or wrong. I gave it my best shot, but I think I've come to a stage now where the club has to take an evolution. And I think, this club will be here now forever. We are in a different league as well. And, we've had a really good honeymoon period. We've been, we've had the money to spend in each budget. And now we've come to a stage where, it needs that next level of quality, I feel. And I'm not saying that I can't do that. I will certainly oversee it, and I will sit back and watch all everything that goes on. But the day-to-day running, the operations, the first team, is something now that, I'm going to step back from and then sort of watch, and hope that, they will achieve the same goals and have the same ambition that, I want for this football club.
So many questions, Rob. I don't think we've got time for them all, but just a few. So obviously you've reflected on this for some time. Would you say that Robbie's decision to leave has almost acted as a catalyst? And obviously with us moving into a higher division, more pressures, so them two things together, as well as your business interests, would you say that's the fundamental reasons?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, there's a lot of factors. Look, me and Robbie were very close. There was no question about it. And, we lived and breathed it. We had two sort of really good operations working together. We had, me doing the business, building the budgets and sort of agreeing the prices and what Robbie could go and spend. And, he was infectious. There was no question about it. We had a really special bond. And, obviously I think since Robbie's gone, I've struggled with that. I think, I've had added pressures, I just want to do now what's right for the club. I feel like the next evolution of this club is to bring in somebody that's better than I am, somebody that can have the energy and carry on with the high expectations and keep driving this club forward.
And I guess you mentioned the board. When you first came in, obviously it was, your gig with Robbie. What does it say about the evolution of the club over the past 5 years that we've been able to attract such a board?
I think it's amazing. I mean, I can't thank the fans for being behind, the dream that I had of building a football club. They backed me. There's no question about it. Football clubs cost an awful lot of money, something that I started to realise probably about 2 years ago, the kind of cost that this football club needs. And, I sort of looked at myself and thought, can I, or am I that type of person that can afford it? And yes, I've done well, but the reality of it is, you're talking millions and millions of pounds to really push for sort of, promotions nowadays. It is a money game, and it doesn't matter how many fans come through the door or pies we sell or beers we sell or ticket sales or whatever. You soon realise that the first team budget will always outweigh 100% the amount of money that you bring into the club. So there is always going to be a deficit, and I say that in the way that, you have an option. You have an option to cut the budget and, you could run a half the budget on what we're spending. But then the reality is you're probably always going to stay in this league. And, to push for promotion, you need to have the backing from the right people to help make that happen. And I feel that the board are behind that. It will be interesting, moving forward on what that looks like, because, we are spending a lot of money. It isn't sustainable at the moment. But from what I've got from, the board and what we want to try and do with this football club is, the backing is there to really try and make that happen.
And just finally, what would you say to the fans? Because there's going to be a lot of out there, a little bit, I wouldn't say disappointed, a little bit sad in terms of yourself going forward, but also in terms of your vision for the next stage of our evolution as Macclesfield FC. I think,
I'm sad in some ways, but I don't want you guys to be sad. I think, the legacy is always, is something that I've built, and I think, hopefully you'll appreciate the amount of effort and time and dedication that I've put into this club. I'm not going to just be walking away, let's make that clear. I've still got quite a heavy percentage in the football club. I've still, I've got quite a lot of powers behind the scenes as well. So, for me, it's about making sure that it's run right. And I think the board will appoint the right person. I've just come to that stage where, I want to come here as a fan and I want to be able to sit in that crowd and relax, and not worry about stewarding plans, safety officers, and all the day-to-day running, whether the pies aren't warm enough, whether there are queues in the fan zone. I'm that passionate about it that, I think I want to pass that to somebody else to now run on a day-to-day, and I want to sit up there and enjoy it. And I just think from me to everybody is, this has been the best journey of my life. And, I want to thank every single person. When I walk across that pitch and I got a standing ovation that time, as an owner of a football club, I can't thank, you all enough for being behind me and believing in me. For someone that has really no football background, really, let's be honest, I think we've done pretty well to get the promotions and, put this football club back where it's going to belong, for the generations to come.
Thanks very much, mate.
No problem.